Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us tonight. We had no idea how this was going to go because, who's not tired of online webinars? But we thought we would put this out, and we're just, here to share with you some of the things that we've been doing in our boards. So we'll just introduce ourselves. My name is Jody Williams. I'm now the past chair of the First Nations Métis Inuit Education Association of Ontario, the longest acronym of an organization, I think, out there. And so I work as the Indigenous Education Lead for Dufferin Peel Catholic, and we have just done this year a big PD for our in-person for grades 1s and 2s, but we also shared out much of what we're going to share with you tonight to our system. And so that's who I am, and I'll pass it over to Brittany.
Saigo sa Wagwego, Brittany Brony Waxanoda, Oguaho, Niwagitaroda, Ganyegehaga, Niwakahunjoda, Kantege Nidoaginun, Nagji, Windsor, Essex, Gitadon. So hi everyone, my name is Brittany Bro. I have been with FNMA EAO for a couple of years now, helping with some French translation and helping, just bring French resources to everyone that requires them. I do work for a French school board in the Windsor, Essex area, so down south. And in my introduction, I shared that I am Mohawk from the Wolf Clan, and my family's from Tyendinaga, but I've always lived outside of the community in the Windsor, Essex area for most of my life. So I will pass it over to Tina.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tina DeCastro, and I'm the teacher consultant for Indigenous Education with the Greater Essex County District School Board. So Brittany is our French counterpart, and I've also been a helper with the FNMI EAO for, I don't know, Jody, how many? Like several years now. I've lost count, and just really, glad we can be here tonight to share a little bit of what we've been working with our boards, and hope it helps you.
So in the chat box and also in email, we've shared with you a link to the slide deck that we're going to be using tonight. And hang on a second, I'm going to make sure I got the right screen here. Yes, this one here. And Brittany is going to also be adding into the chat box as well for you. So every now and then, if you, for those who are just coming in now, she'll put those links in. And so you have it'll look just like this that I'm sharing with you. So you'll have access to all of the links that we're going to be going through tonight with you. And in order to try and make this a bit seamless, we're going to invite you to ask questions. Ask questions using a form, but feel free to, unmute yourself, turn your video on if you want, converse as a live person with us. We're happy to take your questions that way. Or you can, pop it in. You can use the QR code if you want to access it on your phone, or you can click on the link. Again, Brittany's put the link in the chat box as well. Okay, so what is happening with my little thingy here? Okay, so basically, if you haven't noticed this yet, the big kind of changes, and we're going to start off focusing on the social studies curriculum, and we'll highlight the language curriculum as well. And you'll notice in the language curriculum, if you haven't already, that it's very similar in terms of the big kind of ideas really is around revitalization, reclamation, and it does touch on residential schools. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit around how to have that conversation with young children, because we need to be very, very mindful of, that we're not traumatizing our youngest ones, but we can still have the conversations in a soft way for that. And then again, in grade 3, this is where we get into wonderful timeline. I have my opinions on the timeline, but anyway, so getting into ways of life and communities and treaties and looking at, and again, you'll see threaded throughout definitely is this relationship between land and people. And we're going to talk about that as well. So really when we're thinking about, and this has been taken from the work of Dr. Goldie Muhammad, who is a Black thought leader that comes from the States. And we do actually a lot of work around her work, which is based on the historically responsive framework that she uses. But she talks about this idea of, thinking about how do we make our spaces where they can be a place of transformation, joy, and wonder. And really, this is what we want that focus around, is around brilliance, joy, diversity, to really, when we think about the big takeaways, what we want children to be walking away with is this idea of, Indigenous peoples are amazing. And they come from just absolutely brilliant civilizations and nations, and have always been contributing for the betterment of society. So, and the other piece around this is we recognize that this is new learning for many, many teachers, which can, create some fearing and anxiety. But I want to reassure you here, this is where we lean on inquiry. Inquiry is your best friend in this learning journey. And so, the idea here is to go on a co-learning journey with your students. To be able to say, I don't have an answer, but I'm going to find out, is really powerful. And in fact, it invites your students to take more risks in their learning when you, as the adult, are modeling that it's okay to not know. And so the other thing here that you see is that we want to really think about how do we ignite each of our students, their own unique ways of learning, their own unique, every student comes with their own set of gifts, their own ways of being genius, and certainly how to invoke that curiosity with them. So just to kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about bringing this into your classroom. So I'm going to turn it over to Brittany, and she's going to kind of take you through some of these changes, and then we'll talk a little bit about the resources that we have to share with you.
Thanks, Jody. So we'll start with grade 1, Strand A, Heritage and Identity, are changing roles and responsibilities. So some of the key changes were in reclamation and revitalization of identity and culture among First Nations, Métis, and Inuit individuals and community. And we see that there is a specific expectation, A1.5, that was added. And then also a person's relationship with and responsibility to the land or the environment. And so again, another specific expectation was added. And so even in the example, so those are kind of the key examples that are there, but in the student talk and in the teacher prompts throughout the entire curriculum, you'll see different prompts and ways that you can tie the curriculum in with Indigenous education, even if it's not specifically noted like in these two specific expectations.
So here we're going to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive and show you some of the resources that are available. These are all public facing resources that we're going to share. Now, just kind of before getting into this, I want to remind everyone anyone who's working in a publicly funded board, so either Catholic or public, all the boards have Indigenous education leads. So really, that's your first go-to person when checking in to see about accessing resources. Some boards like mine, for example, have a policy, and we have a very strict vetting process in terms of what resources go out to teachers. So again, every school board is going to be different as well, depending on where you're located. Also, probably will shape what kind of content the local community wants schools in their district to be sharing. So I just want to remind folks to always check in with your leads. So these are things that myself, Tina, and Brittany have shared in our school boards, and these are examples, but they're also publicly available for you as well. So this one's been around for a little bit. So I'm gonna just let me know if I click this out, if you still see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, great. The only thing I forgot to do is share sound. Hold on. Share sound. Okay. So this has been around for a little while now, and I'm just going to focus in here on Lessons from the Earth as it ties in specifically to when we're thinking about roles, relationships, and responsibilities, particularly to the environment and for our young children. This is actually based on an Ojibwe story told by Isaac Murdoch called The Fisher Story. And so I'm just going to jump quickly to here because, again, we won't show you all of it because you have these links, but we're just going to show you quick little snippets of what's in these resource links. So in this story, it's actually an animation, and it starts with Isaac introducing himself because we want kids to realize that the animation actually is a real person. And I'll just kind of throw it over here. And he talks a little bit about where the story comes from.
My name is Isaac Murdoch, and I'm from Serpent River.
So I'll just kind of, we'll see how my Wi-Fi is doing. If it's too delayed, I'll skip over it, but sometimes there's a bit of a lag whenever I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so while it's catching up, right here, we're going to focus in on the K-3 lessons. And just so you know, this story, when it does kind of catch up, is based, like I said, it's in animation form. And there's lots of beautiful lessons in the story. So when you click on primary.
Bones scattered all over the place. Fat was just rotting. Berries were just being wasted. That's what happened. And then they start to fight amongst each other. They lost their way. They stopped believing in that governance that the animals gave them. And of course, they had made their own trails. But there was a power in the sky looking down on earth. That power they call Abonene, the wintering spirit. The wintering spirit looked down on the earth and thought, you know what? Those humans are being greedy. I gotta kill that greediness. So the wintering spirit started to blow its breath down on earth, trying to freeze the humans and kill them, so that of course the greediness would leave. But there was a power here on earth that was just as strong as the old man, if maybe not even stronger. It was the birds. And the birds sang their songs. Medicine cast it all over everything, even into the hard-to-reach places. The old wintering spirit could not freeze the earth as long as those birds were there.
Okay, so if you haven't heard the story, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I do want to mention one thing. And there is a video, I don't know if we'll get to it or not, but when we talk about story, especially when we think about the damage that colonialism has done with respect to Indigenous knowledge, and often like what we're talking about is like devaluing, and when we think about story, it's often associated with myths and legends, which then gives us a sense of it's not really real, it's not made up. It's really important that we are speaking about story as a very effective way to transfer knowledge. It could be geographical knowledge, it could be scientific knowledge, it could be mathematical knowledge, it could be all of the above knowledge, but these are ways to convey knowledge, which is what we're doing in school. And I'll give you a tiny little interesting thing about in this particular story, as you just heard this little snippet, it talks about Babunanini, which is the wintering spirit. And there's a reason why the story talks about why the songbirds are part of it. He ends up collecting up all the songbirds. Now, he doesn't collect up all the fish. He doesn't collect up all the beavers. There's a reason why songbirds are part of this. It's not for no reason. Now, interestingly, there has been a study done very recently that shows the disappearance of songbirds has actually impacted weather, and particularly winter. So when we start to look at, Western science, we say is often just catching up to what Indigenous knowledge is always known. So in this story and Indigenous knowledge, there has already been known this relationship between weather systems and songbirds. So I just thought I would mention it because it just happened to be that's the part where I clicked on in this story. But anyway, when you go and you click on these, so let's dive in and I'll just show you very, very briefly here, because again, you have access to this. So there's 7 big ideas. You can hear the sound bites. And then I'll just click on, you have all of these different ones you can click to. So I'm going to click on, well, let's do this one. I'll skip to this one. You can go in order, but just to kind of give you an idea. So each of these work in the same way. They have a teaching that's provided in text. They have the teaching that's provided in video. So again, you as the teacher your job is not to provide the cultural knowledge. You let the speaker here, in this case, Isaac Murdoch, provide the cultural knowledge. And then there's a lesson plan that you can download, and it has, this one's called Teamwork, and it has, it has a Minds On, activity and consolidation piece. And so you're bringing students into making those connections, in this case about teamwork, because the concept is about working together. And so you can do that, and it's all like ready to go. But the other idea is that these give you some ideas, and hopefully you can kind of go on your own in connecting to the story and to the teachings that are there. And then in some cases, in other areas, they may have, maybe it's in, let's go back to the next one here in this one. You'll find links to, so here's, for example, other related videos that connect into this Bagajigan, which is the importance of offerings. And so this lesson plan is on the gift of giving. Now I mentioned you can go back, you'll see here, it's not just for primary, there's junior and intermediate grades is here as well, but just again, to show you there. So that's what that resource is about. And then you'll see again, when you click on these links, you'll see more of these throughout. There's these little, we started putting together these little video series that just has, again, catered to the young children.
Hi, everybody. I'm Isaac Murdoch, and this is...
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Paul.
And we're here to talk about Orange Shirt
And
Day.
it's
But
lagging
first,
on my end, but...
we want to introduce you to Nana Buju.
And Nookamis.
Hi, Grandma.
Honey.
Honey, how was your day?
Really good. I'm so happy to be here with everybody.
Me too.
Okay, so again, just to give you a little snippet, so kid-friendly language and content in talking about Orange Shirt Day, and you can see here, right, like when we talk about reclaiming and revitalizing aspects of identity that were lost or taken away. So again, we're having those gentle conversations about it. And then Tina is going to be chatting about some of these books here. I don't know if you want to mention a little bit now.
Well, we'll be talking about them a little bit later as well. These are just great titles that are linked to these specific expectations. But Jody, we did have a question already about the resource that you just mentioned, Lessons from the Earth and Beyond. And the question was, are they available in French?
Well, maybe one day Brittany will translate that monster resource. We have lots in French coming, but in that one specifically, I'm sorry, no.
No, but I believe we do have the Fisher story that was translated. It was in the work. Yeah, it is translated. There's some English parts like to make sure that we're keeping like the authenticity of the speaker, but yeah, so that one was translated. I'll send it back to you, Jody. But I do want to touch.
I'll upload it.
Okay, on just that last one in the corner, Le Monde Selon, I added that one. So it is a resource. It talks about kind of to that A1.5 about reclaiming and revitalizing aspects of identity. So it's a bunch of children from different nations across the world, but there's a couple of different Indigenous kids, and they just talk about how they've their culture and how their family is revitalizing different cultural practices. So that's something that you could really use for grade 1s, grade 2s, even grade 3s, but specifically really good for grade 1 and 2.
And like we mentioned, in each slide, you'll notice there are mentor texts that are really well linked to these specific expectations that have been added to the curriculum.
So then in strand B, there's some topic about traditional territory and treaties. And so that comes down to the B 3.1, but it also connects back to expectation B1 as well. So describe some aspects of interrelationship between people and their natural and built features of their community. And so even if that doesn't necessarily say like Indigenous people, we know that we can still make that natural link there. And so then on the next slide, there's a couple resources on how we can do that.
So yeah, and so you can see here again, this is an opportunity to really understand the local context and where you're situated and where in the territories or the communities that's wherever you are in your area to start to learn about that. So for me in my area, we're just outside the GTA. The Greater Toronto area. And so our main focus is having students learn about who are the Anishinaabeg and the Ongohongwe, which is, proper terminology instead of using Iroquois. And we'll talk about terminology in a bit. And understanding, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And, there's so many things to unpack with that, but really having opportunities for kids to understand, those two big groups and the multiple nations there. So in here, when you click on this, and you'll notice also Brittany has done an amazing job here as well. So when you click on this link, it'll take you here. And you'll see here this continuum of learning. And how this, so things like you'll see here that are common throughout. So Indigenous peoples have and continue to influence and make contributions to society. This is something that, you could be doing all the time throughout the year and throughout every single grade. And when we think about, society and how horrible and racism is very much alive and well. Colonialism is still alive and well. And one of the best ways to combat that is to showcase the beauty and the brilliance of Indigenous peoples in terms of contributions. And this other idea too that's threaded throughout is that Indigenous peoples and nations have always been here, still exist. And if not for those early agreements via treaties, Canada could not even come into an existence. And you'll see once you kind of get into grade 7 and 8, you can kind of get into that. But this idea in the early grades is just, when we get into talking about treaties, and which is really about a promise and the importance of keeping our promises. And that we also have these beautiful natural laws that students can be learning about. So when you click on here, you will see that grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, they all have like these big ideas, inquiry prompts, and then where it connects in specifically to the social studies curriculum. So you see here, like, for example, natural laws and the big idea. Natural laws help to keep us in good relations with each other and the environment. And then some questions, sample questions that you can utilize. So again, when you click on to the French, en français, how's my French? How's that? It's pretty good.
It's getting a lot better.
So again, same idea, right? So you click here and you'll have it all en français. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
No,
Jody,
just that
sorry.
the how we are related is also in French. So the videos are available on it's a YouTube playlist, and the speakers aren't speaking French because we're respecting their language that they're able to communicate in, but they are closed captioned, so schools can still use them and have that closed captioning.
Oh, who did that?
It's always been like that. So,
thank you, Marcy.
sorry. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so that's the same with Godot System and Kime. When you get to that one, so on our YouTube channel, there's a playlist So then when you click on the videos, you can actually see the closed captioning. And so then French schools have been just using that to, read the French.
Amazing. I don't even think I knew that. Did I know that? If I did know that, I forgot about that. And
That was from the beginning. And,
Is it-
there's policy now for a lot of colleges and universities that they won't share videos unless they're closed captions. So we just did the work up front and it was worth it for sure.
So everyone, the black screen there that's talking, that's Marcy. And Marcy has been spearheading these incredible resources that have been put out by the Anishinaabeg Nation. So if you're wondering who is that, that is who that is. Anyway, so I'm going to play you the trailer for this incredible resource.
Ani, Kinawea. Hello everyone, it's me, Alex. I'm so happy that you are here going on this learning journey to better understand the importance of treaty education. I'm going to explain how this journey works. Let's get started. First, you will start here on this landing page. You will notice these different turtles. Each turtle represents a section of learning. Turtle 1 is who are the Anishinaabeg. Turtle 2 is what is a treaty. Turtle 3 is wampum. Turtle 4 is Gado-na-ga-na-na, the dish with one spoon. Turtle 5 is the Treaty of Niagara. Turtle 6 is the Robinson-Huron Treaty. Turtle 7 is the Anishinaabeg Hall of Heroes. And Turtle 8 is the last stop, bringing it all together. As you complete each section, you will notice on the right-hand side the wampum belt will begin to get colored in. Ready to get started? Let's go!
So Alex there, am I allowed to, Marcy, am I allowed to say who Alex is?
Ani, Kinawea. Hello.
Sure.
Okay. So Alex belongs to Marcy. And you might remember the treaty kits that originally went out and where this kind of started from. And these two books are beautiful, easy books for our youngest children to kind of understand. And so Alex, this is actually Alex being recorded. So it's, so all of these, and Dakota also is in animation, it's actually Dakota, but now the kids are growing up. So yeah, I guess we've memorialized them in their young people there. But just to kind of, again, like this resource has follows this kind of format where you'll have a bit of what's in here. So you'd be learning about who are the Anishinaabeg, the first part of We Are All Treaty People, and Who We Are by Ogama Duke Peltier. And it just takes you through this little lesson of learning. So each section has that. And then we suggest for primary, the first 3 parts are great for K-3. So then here we get into kind of what is a treaty, but looking at it through the lens of a treaty is a promise. What is a treaty? Understanding inherent rights. And then part 3, which is wampum. And I'll just kind of pull out a sample of this so you kind of see what it is.
Welcome back. Let's talk about wampum belts. I would like to share a story with you.
Ani, Bojo. Alex Dijnakas.
So here's a read aloud, and I'll just kind of skip over
Sturgeon
this
Falls, Indian.
because of time.
Hello, my name is Alex.
That's Alex
I'm from
reading his
Dokis.
book that he authored.
So we believe that many years ago,
And then there's these
2
animation
women were
videos
fighting on the
again,
moon, and one of them was thrown off.
which talks about this
She was carrying a medicine
how
bag
wampum comes
that
to
was
be
filled
from
with
the
star
Anishinaabe
medicine. And when she
perspective.
landed on the earth, of course, she splashed.
And so it kind of
Hopefully
goes
by
back and
now,
forth, as you
You're
can
beginning
see.
to see how important these agreements are to the Anishinaabe. They are also very spiritual and include many aspects of the natural world.
So it kind of goes back and forth. And so it's can also be used in a self-directed way as well. But this is where we would suggest, like, for the primaries to kind of do 1, 2, 3. But again, dive in and see what else is in there. Because there's really great stuff. There's games that come in later on, all kinds of things. And then back into here. So this is just, again, a little 5 days of learning for Treaty Week. So you can click on a day and you'll see, like, there's, I'll just jump over to day 5. If you haven't seen this one yet, it's a really cute video about, with Chad Solomon. And it's a really cute video with his puppet talking about, again, like, the importance of a promise. And then everything that we do, we always are encouraging people to take action. It's kind of like the so what, now what. And just another one of the videos that we showed a little snippet of with the Orange Shirt Day. So this one in here is talking about treaties. And again, with the young kids in mind. And just one last thing, just before we move on back to in regards to the treaty resource, there is a teacher's guide that is on the website. Marcy, am I correct in that?
It's actually available to order. It's a physical copy.
Is it, but is it found on the website?
No,
Oh.
it has to be ordered. Yeah.
How do people order it?
So if you go back to if you go to the top of the education resources, and then if you scroll down just one more row, the order forms to your left there. Yeah. So it's got all our resources on there. Puzzles,
go.
books, teacher's guides, whatever. So.
Just a little question that's popped in. This is all of the resources that we're sharing are public and available to anyone in Ontario and beyond. They're all public shared resources.
Jody, you also mentioned at the beginning about focusing on local treaties in the area that you live in. So Jody had mentioned earlier as well about connecting with the person who is the Indigenous lead in your board. Just because speaking about my board in particular, we do have a resource that is aligned specifically to our local area. So you may want to connect with the Indigenous lead in your board, as there may be already something that's developed as well on top of these wonderful resources.
Yep, absolutely. Always, yes. Always check in with your leads to make sure you're getting the local context. And then another question is, are the resources free? Everything that we are sharing are free. Anything that's not here may have a charge. So, like the example we just talked about with the teacher guide. So that would be something that would be charged, but the whole digital resource that we just were sharing there, that's all no charge. It's all there for you. Okay, so grade 2.
And then I just wanted to add to that too. So if there is a resource, say like the ones from the Anishinaabe Nation that you're interested in, connect with your lead, because they might have it, right? They might have already purchased it and it's, maybe just not made it to your school yet or your classroom. So always just reach out and check first. So grade 2. So grade 1 really focuses, like the key theme is really identity and self. And when we think about little 6-year-olds, that's really very much where they're at in their development. Grade 2 then kind of expands on that and talks more about traditions and celebrations in families. And so one of the key things that was changed in Strand A is the impact a residential school system has had on traditions, customs, teachings, celebrations amongst First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. There's a truck backing up right outside my window. I apologize. Let me just close that. It's convenient. So anyways, that does come up a couple times throughout the different specific expectations. So on the next slide, we have a few examples of resources.
So again, these are just examples. This one here, this is actually part of a bigger Inuit education resource that Troy Miracle also helped put together, and Koisa Edidik, who also consulted on this resource to make sure that, you know, the information was accurate. So there's all kinds of stuff in here, and I'll just click to where you can find on that particular page. Now this is K to 12, so, you know, make sure you're going through things before you just, you know, present something from here. But again, there's like really great places to get books is in there as well. And so here's the Inuit storytelling project that was on that front page. So there's 57 dots represent videos that connect to land, history, culture, and perspectives of the Inuit. And so you can click to explore more. So that's, again, a little example there when talking about looking at different ways that heritage is passed on. And then we have, again, some of these texts that are being used. Tina, do you want to mention anything here?
Sure. Yeah, again, each of these texts are beautiful ways of not only introducing Indigenous traditions and celebrations, but helping then students to link to their own traditions and their own cultural celebrations. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that using literature.
This is a really cute video. I'll just play you a little, like, you're just going to fall in love with this girl because she's so super cute.
Hi, I'm Rosie, and I'm Métis. Most of my friends don't know what that means. Here's what I tell them. The Métis people started when a bunch of guys called the Voyageurs came here to the prairies to work the fur trade. Along the way, they met the First Nation people who had lived here for thousands of years. They helped the Voyageurs in their travels. Sometimes the Voyageurs even married some of the First Nation women. Their babies were a mix of both cultures.
Anyway, super, super cute. Just gives you kind of like a an overview of the ethnogenesis of the Métis, brought to you by Rosie Darling. So that there's that video is there for you. And then Brittany, wanna?
Yeah, it's a resource with Lisa Tuktanskane. So it's a bunch of different videos talking about a bunch of different cultural things and traditions, mostly from Anishinaabeg communities or Atikamekw in Quebec, but still relevant for different areas in Ontario. So there's those, and then they break them down as well. So if you just want kind of a snippet of the videos, where it says like season 1 or saison 1 and you click down, it'll show different shorter clips of these videos.
Hold on, my tabs are growing. Okay.
So Jody, while you do that, I can talk a little bit about On the Trapline. It's one of my favorite picture books. And it's such a beautiful example of intergenerational knowledge and how it's shared through an experience. And there is also YouTube videos of the author himself talking to students about why he wrote the book and what the importance of that book. And we always try to do that as much as possible, is to bring the author's voice into the classroom through those videos when you can, because they also build the cultural context that's in the book. And he even talks about how to pronounce the words in Cree. I know that we're hesitant sometimes when we're doing read alouds to read the Indigenous words that are in there, but it's really important for us to model for students how we're learning together and we're trying. And David Robertson has some great resources where he does that in his books, where he has videos that helps you to understand or to listen to the words that are in the book being read.
And I'm just going to emphasize that, you know, again, these are opportunities to recenter Indigenous voices with the understanding that it's going to be connecting to every student's unique identity. So it's a way to, you know, it's almost like it's like a modeling, right? So what in this book here, you know, Kokum's Kitchen, for example, you know, cooking with your grandma or cooking with somebody that you love. What's, you know, so you can learn about this in this book, but then, you know, you ask the students, like, who's somebody that you love to cook with? Or share a meal with, and what's your favorite meal? What do you like to eat? So you're always relating it back to them and their own identities and their own understandings.
And so in Strand B, we talk about interrelationship between contemporary First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities and the land. And so that comes up quite a few times in the overall expectation, actually, and in the specifics.
So again, like remember from before, the Lessons from the Earth website that we brought you to, and then there's another section in that website called Lessons from the Water, and then there's the latest one, which is called Lessons from Beyond, and that one has a whole thing on astronomy knowledge, and so looking at the knowledge of the night sky, and that's a huge collaboration with different communities from around the world and even NASA. So looking at how does Western science align with and resonate with what Indigenous knowledges have always known. And so that's there's a bunch of animations in there that talk about different understandings of the night sky. And then there's actually specific lessons that get into connecting with the new math curriculum for grades 6, 7, 8, just as an FYI. But certainly the content in there is great to explore. This one here is, and you'll see here as well, there's a French guide as well. So this is a big bilingual resource that comes from the FNMI EAO. And so if I click on it, so there's two places where you'll find this resource. So you'll find it here under public resources, and then you'll also find it here under the members only. So now most school boards have a license. And so if you're not sure, again, check in with your lead because there's a whole bunch of stuff. And in here, this is where you'll find the actual teacher guides. Under the public resource, you'll find not the teacher guide, but you'll find other things. There's lots of PDFs that you can download and use as fillable PDFs and you'll see here, they're also in French. And all of this is, it was originally done up for the new grades 4 and 5 curriculum. However, you'll see that there's lots of ways you could bring it into the primary as well. And all of these connect into this huge library bank of videos. It just takes a little minute to load here. But all of these videos are also have French subtitles done as well. And they're all roughly like 3 to 5 minutes. So they're all in bite-sized chunks, and they all come with, you'll see like these different topics. So like early life, leadership. These were taken in 3 northern communities because at the time we wanted to, everything's very central or southern Ontario centric. And so this was an opportunity to showcase the beautiful communities in Northern Ontario, which is taking a while to load here. So Kitchename, Goosup, and Nynawug is one community. Ojibways of Onegaming is the other community, and Chapleau Lake Cree is the third community here. And they have these, like, you know, I'll just kind of, again, a little snippet. So this one's on geography, but when you think about, you know, some of those expectations around the importance of land, and when we say land, it could be water.
Kitchenemeksip Ininwak, which translates from the Ojibwe Cree language, which is our native tongue. It means the people of Big Trout Lake. So we're situated in the middle of the boreal forest, about 600 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, and just within the Hudson Bay lowlands.
There's about 28 rivers that flow into Big Trout. And every river that flows into Big Trout gives life to this lake.
So again, just that, like, not even the first minute. So maybe you can start to already see about the importance of waterways and how that really shapes life in the community, both in the past, but also currently, and why, you know, it's so important when we talk about protections of land and waters and keeping things clean. There's, you know, 1,000,001 connections you can make with that. And again, always relating it back to the individual students around, you know, what are some of the water that's around where, you know, where we live? You know, why is it important that we protect that water? And, you know, if we have clean drinking water, how about the baby birds that are being born, right? Because, you know, kids are always thinking about that is, you know, how do we make sure baby birds have clean water too? So there's lots of ways to have those conversations. And again, because of time, the link is there for you. And, you know, take some time and go through these, because there's all kinds of really beautiful little videos with so many topics that you can explore in your class.
And these,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Jody, I wanted to share at the very end as well of the presentation, we have the slide decks with the bookshelves with the different relationship to land and relationship to water. So even though those specific books are not here on this slide, there's many different, right, books that can be used within those slide books at the end of the presentation in those slide decks.
Yeah, awesome. So like if you, so if you used, maybe you showed that video and then you could follow it up with one of the books that Tina's referring to as to continue the conversation. This here, when you click on this, again, it's like a link of more links. So in here, these are, you know, this is a playlist. So there's a whole bunch of YouTube videos that all are connected with Indigenous knowledge systems and the land. And these ones here, so for example, they all have at least a video with them and, you know, some, you know, suggestions on how you might want to use it. So there's a beautiful video that gets shared about this, about the importance, the power of Miigwam, which is ice. And then, you know, some sample inquiry questions to do with that. And so they all kind of, a lot of them follow that same idea. This one here, for example, this is probably the most recent. Oh, I have to hyperlink it. Okay, I'll have to remember to go back and hyperlink it. So that's a really beautiful resource on the sugar season. And it has both Ojibwe and Oneida versions of this special time of year and a little video as well. So again, those are all other resources for you.
And grade 3, everybody loves grade 3. So grade 3 had some minor adjustments, I would say. And so the topics of way in life. So grade 3 is really kind of that history piece. And so traditionally, before we had kind of other areas within the curriculum to explore these things, this was kind of like students' first introduction to like Indigenous people. And so luckily we introduced that much earlier on now, but it's really a view and a comparison between different communities in 1780 to 1850. And then also kind of comparing the changes from now to that time period. And so there's now some resources. Want to go on that with that, Tina, Jody?
Okay, sure. Up here, maybe Tina, do you want to, because this is where we kind of get into some specifics around looking at residential schools. And so when we think about the last week of September being Truth and Reconciliation Week, we have this resource here.
So it is a resource that we developed that really just helps educators because, especially at the beginning when we were introducing these very complex and big concepts to educators as well as to students, is what does that look like? So FNMI EAO developed guidelines for educators to use when introducing the topic of residential schools to students. So we always start with educators as the learner first, right? So what do we need to learn first? And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, there's little activities for you to do, videos as well that, are age appropriate to be used in the classroom during Truth and Reconciliation Week. And we always say, it's not just during Truth and Reconciliation Week that we address this concept, but there's ready-made activities for you for each day of that week.
And again, you'll see some repeated things here too, right? Because when we're looking at, again, compare what life was like and to now, this, again, going back to that resource, this one would be a really good one for that in terms of again, looking at key components of identity. There's that video again, opportunity to talk about treaties, because we see right in here, identify a few key treaties. Again, going back to what we were saying before, check in with your lead, because depending on where you live or work, will be different in terms of the land or agreements, or in some cases, no treaty agreements in terms of being on unceded land. And, that is significant as well. Again, there's that resource that we showed before that has really great stuff as well. And then this, we'll come back to this one because it's part of the bookshelf that we're going to share.
And then lastly, grade 3 strand B is about living and working in Ontario. So were some additions to actually all 3 of the expectations, and it's about the interrelationship between land and the people, including land use, employment, natural environments. So in the past, it was a lot of how to essentially exploit the land for money. And so now they've kind of tried to reframe it a little bit better and kind of talk a little bit more about our relationship and responsibilities to the land. And so that theme or that lens was shifted in all 3 overall expectations for that strand a little bit.
So again, you'll see common themes, right? These are where these resources can be used in multiple ways, to connect with all those different curriculum strands. Maybe this one has the yay, this link works.
There it is.
So again, when we think about land use and how and what's happening on the land during the seasons and how do people interact with the land, again, can be both past and present. So has things changed, or how are we, revitalizing and understanding the importance of these practices on the land? So a lot of people don't know, everybody kind of knows about maple syrup, but what few people know is about the sweet water and how important that is, that we should be drinking that sweet water that comes directly from the trees, whereas we just kind of know it as that nice, yummy syrup that we put on our pancakes. So again, there's the cultural knowledge that gets shared in here.
Sil
And you get to hear the language.
is our midwinter, or to the non-Ongwe people is known as February. We do our celebrations in hopes of getting ready for the spring. So Sahtagosil transforms and it goes into the next phase, which is the Wahni's Lux. In that split day moon, where we are gaining our substance and getting ready for that. Water from the trees and things are starting to wake up a little bit. That transforms into Lasagayong Bis. Lasagayong Bis is the thunder moon. There we hear the grandfathers that come back and start to shake and wake things up in anticipation of spring, so that we are getting ready to plant. And all the new young things are coming back after a long winter.
And then you'll notice here there's a sound bite, so you can hear the sound being pronounced and the explanation as well. So again, you can click on the different sounds and you can hear, like, you know.
Uwahanigwal. 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 Maple water or soft maple tree. We drink this soft maple water for detoxification from the long, hard winter. That maple water is then collected and it is boiled, that turns into our sap.
So they all have, and then, you know, here's the list. And then there's another version if you want to check this out. This is like from, it takes you into this resource. If you want to hear some Anishinaabemowin. And then again, like, these are, again, some other ways that we can bring in, this comes out of our contributions deck that we'll share at the very end. Looking at, again, when we think about, this is a bit of a tricky one because of the way the curriculum is about jobs in Ontario, you know, for grade 3s. But this one here talks about, you'd have to review this one first. It's a very short documentary just talking about the impacts of dams on the ability for communities in the north to harvest their wild rice. Because they basically, like, open the dams and raise the water. And the community's like, can you just wait? And they're like, oh, no, we don't. We're just going to open them now. Like, they don't have to open them when they do, but because they open them early, it always floods out their wild rice beds. It's so dumb. But anyway, it talks about that and the importance of water. But again, you'd have to kind of view it yourself and determine if you think your grade 3s would be able to take that in. So now we have a whole bunch of just kind of additional resources. So when you click on this, you'll see here, these are playlists when you click on it. So there's 14 videos in this playlist and they're all animations. And here there's 10 videos and they're all these little stories of Nanabojo and Nokomis with Isaac Murdoch and Shannon. So there's 10 of those. And then this one, there's just one. But again, like, you know, trying to balance out some perspectives and not losing anybody. Alika does this really beautiful, shares these beautiful teachings. It's a webinar that was recorded, but it's really, really beautiful. Talking about the idea of togetherness and connectedness. Now this one, okay, so we're gonna start to get into guidelines. And one of the things we know that teachers are often thinking about is wanting to get our kids, you know, doing hands-on things. But this also ends up being one of the areas that gets really badly appropriated. And it's not because anybody's trying, you know, intentionally trying to cause harm or doing anything incorrectly. Of course not. But this is where we need to really shift a lot of past practices that have been happening in the education system. And, you know, when we think about Indigenous, like the impacts of colonialism and kind of, you know, the purpose of colonialism really has been to move people off the land through horrific acts of genocide, to extract the resources. It's all about extracting. And so when we look at knowledges, and in this case, this knowledge is expressed through art, it also has been heavily extracted in the same ways when we think about colonialism. And so unfortunately, because of education being kind of a tool, it's been created as this as a branch off of the purpose of colonialism, because when we think about an education, it's been a very controlled narrative. That's why so many people don't know all of this new information that's now coming out and being presented. All we've looked at is the map of Canada. We've not seen the land presented in any other way in education. And so we've systematically erased, a lot of nations that have always been here and are still here. And so this has also happened. This has been happening in the world of arts, especially. And so I always caution people too, like, we don't have to craft everything in order to have kids be learning really important concepts. So what we did is one of the artists that you see mentioned a lot, obviously, Isaac Murdoch. So we created this resource because he's the only artist I know of who has said, use my art, copy my art. And, he just wants to kind of, and he always says, like, use it for the purpose of teaching or inspiring action to protect the lands and waters. But before we dive into this, we need to be very careful. Again, just because we've always been doing something doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. And so that we have to change these past practices or maybe even current practices. And so, really stop and think before you engage in an activity, particularly when looking at art. Do you have permission? So a lot of times we're just copying away, replicating somebody's artwork. But did we stop and ask, do we have permission? And this is what I mean by it's become such a common practice that it's become kind of, we've normalized it without realizing that, people don't want their artworks copied. That's called plagiarism. And so, we have this kind of checklist here, right? So do you have permission before you engage in, and this is what I mean by when we're replicating, reproducing, mimicking. So these are these kinds of things that we're focusing in on. Now, let's say yes, in the case of Isaac. Okay, so yes, is there someone from the Indigenous community leading the activity and or sharing knowledge, which could be via obviously in person is the best, but maybe it is through video. If not, big caution on probably you shouldn't proceed. But in this case, we'll use this resource. Yes, we have a yes here. Does the activity require students to take on the role or voice of Indigenous person? If it does, then please don't do that. Don't have students take on the role or voice. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more in a minute. And then if not, then, and again, remember we were saying always connect it back to their own personal identity, their own personal lived experience, even for yourself. Like, how are you connecting to this information? So in this resource, which is, you'll see how it does this. So when you click on it, it brings you here. And so it just gives you a little bit of how to use this resource. And this, you'll hear right from Isaac. He'll share a little bit about this resource.
Art is a beautiful way to explore ideas, concepts, and also emotion. And so I've always felt that art can have the last word and inspire generations of people into change and also into action. And so right now, as we are in the middle of climate change, I feel that it's really important that we use every instrument that we have to make the world better. And art is one of those. So let's have fun and let's do something that's going to change the world.
So key piece in there, right? Action, action, action. So we're always thinking about ways to move, not just kids, all of us, into action. And again, art is a wonderful way to do this. So in each of these, if it follows the same kind of format here. So here's one of his images. You can click on him. Have kids think about, like, what do you think is in this? What do you notice? What do you see? You'll find out in all of his artwork, there's always a heart somewhere. Always. So you could like talk about that, right? Like, why is it important? What's special about always having a heart? It's really beautiful. So there's all kinds of things you can find out, and then lots of suggestion on how to take action, and then a little explanation so you can listen to him explain why he did this image. And then there's coloring pages as well you can download, especially for the little ones. And so they all follow this same format. And at the very end, I'll just skip down to the very end, is where, oh, maybe it's the next one. Okay, so if you want just the coloring pages, you can click here and like just download the coloring pages. And then there's some links to other connected resources in there. So I know that was a fast overview, but again, these are all here, so you can dive in more deeply at your own time.
So Jody, before we go on to this section, we do have a question regarding if you could share with the group how schools that are run by First Nations communities can access the FNMI EAO website for free.
So you can email membership@fnmieao.com. And they will sort you out, go through there. Now the organization is based on volunteers. So sometimes there can be a delay in getting back. You can also email me at pastchair@fnmieao.com. I can also help out with that too.
Okay, thank you. So a big change in the curriculum has been that now we are tasked with the responsibility of discussing colonization and residential schools with really young children. And we wanted to just take a look at what does that really mean when we're talking about grade 1. Like, we always talk to educators about the word colonization, like how many of us as even adults can really unpack the definition of and what that means. And so what does that look like when we're talking about grade 1? And so what we've done here is kind of broken it down for you. We begin with just explaining who are Indigenous people to the grade 1s, right? That they were the first people that came here before anybody else to take care of the land, and that they attended residential schools away from their families, and they weren't very good experiences like we have that like not similar to the ones that we have today. So very simple. In grade 2, we build onto that, and we introduce to them the idea that other countries settled, right, in already occupied lands, that there were already people here living and taking care of the land. And Indigenous people, because of that, lost their lands and were displaced and forced to move. And part of that also is an increased knowledge and understanding, again, building on to what they learned in grade 1 about residential schools, that we talk about, think about the things that we learn when we're with our families, right? We ask that question, what do you learn from your family? Well, it becomes this huge long list of things, right? Language being one of them, traditions being one of them, our celebrations being one of them. Well, if we're not with our families, these are things that we can't learn. So that's what happened when Indigenous children went to residential schools. They weren't able to learn the things they did that we learn today with our families. So that's why the revitalization piece is so important. And then you can start talking about what are Indigenous people doing to revitalize that. And then in grade 3, we move it a little further, and we add the understanding that the intent of residential school, not just the impact now, but the intent was assimilation. And so that's where we build on to what they've already learned in grade 1 and grade 2 to help them understand the intent of the residential schools themselves. And teachers always, they're always worried about how do I explain this in a way in which the students can understand. So I always say, try to make connections to things that are relevant in their lives today. So the example I use is if someone, we have a classroom right now, right? We each have our own desks, we have our own materials, but in terms of colonization, think about another class coming in and all of a sudden just using the space. They didn't ask us to use the space. They didn't ask us to use the desks and the shared materials. What would that look like in our classroom now if a whole other class came in to use our space without even talking to us or discussing that with us first? So then it helps them to make those connections of how that would make them feel, because students understand what they can relate to and understand when it's something that they can make a connection to themselves in their lives today. So I don't know if Jody, if you or Brittany want to add something. No, okay.
Covered it. Like, it's really just that idea of building, right? Because I forget exactly how it's written, but in grade 1 there's a specific expectation that was added, and when you first read it, like, there's so many educators panic because they're like, how on earth am I going to talk? I think it's revitalization due to the impacts of residential schools, and teachers read that and go like, how do I do this? These kids are 6. Like, how do we? So this idea of just kind of planting those initial thoughts and then building upon them is really important, and really something that, you know, all 3 of us have been talking about with our own boards. And it seems to be kind of helping people just understand how to go about this learning.
And one of the little books that I like to use right in the beginning is Amick Loves School. I don't know if it's here. It's not on this list here, but it is a really sweet book to introduce the concept of the revitalization, because the grandfather looks at what's happening in school today for his grandson, which is for Amick, which is so different than his own experience. But then the book ends in this beautiful, way in which it shows that things have changed. Like, the student himself is now learning his language at school. But throughout the book, in a very simple way that students can understand, it highlights that it was different for his grandfather than it was for him. So Amick Loves Schools is a really sweet book to use in grade 1. In this slide itself, you'll have, there's a video links to 2 authors actually talking about how to discuss residential schools in your classroom. So I'm just looking at time. I'm not going to go into, I'm not going to open it up, but they're going to be there for you and you're going to have access to them. In this one, he actually, David actually talks to a grade 1 teacher about how she unpacks the big concept of residential schools in her classroom. And then again, these are different resources that you'll have access to through the slide deck. Sorry, I'm just recognizing that we have 15 minutes left and a lot of slides. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. We've mentioned already that in each slide deck, you'll notice there are books, storybooks that are mentioned and highlighted for you. Here you'll find a sway that you'll have access to. There are guidelines here that were actually developed in collaboration with the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee that we work with in our school board. And there's just different guidelines of how do you ensure that a resource that you're using is authentic. So there's lots of different material there to help you and that you can review when you have time, which is very rare for all of us as very busy people. So if we want to go to the next slide, again, please feel free to explore that resource. Here, one of the guidelines is always it's important to discuss terminology. What I say is we can't possibly, no resource is perfect, and we can't possibly not have students exposed to certain terminology. So it's about helping them to learn what terminology to use themselves. And so here are 2 little videos that you can use with primary students in particular, and then 2 guiding questions to help, which is one of them is explain what you learned about terms, labels, names, and students get in, even in grade 1, great discussion about the importance of names and labels, and then connect it. So how are these important in your family, in your community, or in your country? And then Brittany, do you want to talk a little bit about the last video there?
Yeah, it's not a video. It's actually just a link to
That's right.
a resource. And that one's more educator focused, but it's just a lot of times, especially schools that have immersion programs, immersion teachers often are like, okay, I understand the terminology in English, but like, how does that translate? Because it doesn't always translate the way we think it does. One prime example is a lot of times we'll hear people say indigène, which, you know, would be, we would think is the translation to Indigenous, but it's not. When we translate that to French, it has more of a primitive sense to it. And we only really use that term to talk about like Indigenous plants, not people. So we prefer to use the term autochtone, which then a lot of people are like, is that the right word? It is. So that guide there just kind of helps sort out those different terms in French, and it's more again towards adults or even, you know, secondary school students, but I wouldn't really use it with primary.
Okay. Again, learner first, right? We as educators need to be learners as well in this process. So one of really important pieces is also to explore the context. So helping the students to understand the historical or cultural context of what it is that you're reading. And again, a great way to do this is to find a little video of the author talking about the book itself. And again, we've mentioned this before, but whenever you can find resources or books that represent your local area, the better. And one of the things that we always do is we locate the Indigenous community that the author and the illustrator belongs to, and if possible, their relationship specifically to the story. So if you want to, those are some guiding questions for you. If you want to go to the next slide.
Just before that, Tina, I just want to jump in, like, that's really important because one of the reasons why we have in our board a very strict vetting process is because there's unfortunately a lot of the term pretendian, if you've not heard of it before. There's a lot of people who have claimed to be Indigenous and then they're not. And so one kind of, you know, when you're developing kind of that critical lens as, okay, so how do I know if this person is legitimate or not? One way is to kind of look and see, like, somebody should be able to always say, I'm so-and-so from, and I'm a member of such and such community. And, you know, there's like evidence of like, talk about how family are connected to that community. And so that's kind of some of the look fors. And, you know, especially be very careful online, like grabbing things off the internet, especially when it comes to cultural knowledge, because it's just wild out there. There's all kinds of, you can get creation stories and all kinds of things, but, you know, you have to be very careful because of the problematic pieces around, you know, when you see like Native American wisdom or Cherokee wisdom, or there's no way to tell, like if you can't see evidence of a person and the community to which they're a member of, that's a big red flag. So I just wanted to add that in.
And we often, when we do that, we also actually show the map so that students see where the place is, right? So our next slide here talks about another important thing to focus on is identifying the theme. So we've already talked about so many of these themes, and we have also different, the slide deck with the different bookshelves that have these themes on them as well. So we want, there we go. Just some for your own, again, I'm just cognizant of time, just for your own learning and to help you. What are some questions to explore the concept of theme when you're reading Indigenous authors and books written by Indigenous authors? Here are some for you here. And again, it's always interesting, right? Like where we're learning how sometimes the things that we ask students get unpacked in a way that we wouldn't expect. So here are some appropriate reading responses related to themes. So write and tell a story of your own that has that same theme. So you're not retelling a story that's been written by an Indigenous author, but you're telling a story of your own with the same theme or lesson that's shared. Again, your own picture. You're not copying the artist's picture. You're writing your own. And I love this question. How might your understanding of the theme of this story make your own life better? And how might your understanding of the theme of this story make someone else's life better? So it's that idea of giving back and reciprocity.
And it's also brings in that joyful piece as well. And it's also, again, going back to that igniting students' genius and creativity. And you can also, again, thinking back to the art pieces as well, right? So learn about Indigenous artists, learn about, you know, explore the world of like artwork and things that are being created, but don't, but this is the big difference, right? It's like, but look at those themes. What is the artist conveying? So maybe they're conveying their connection to land. That's always a big common one. And then what is your connection to land? What would it look like? You know, maybe give them, you know, a multiple modes to create with, paints, Play-Doh, I don't know, or just pieces of paper ripped up into, I don't know, whatever. How could you depict your connection to land? So again, it's that same understanding. We can take that here and apply it to when we're looking at artwork as well.
And you talked about perspective, Jody, earlier, and we talked about how we don't want students to write from the perspectives, right, of Indigenous people. But one learning that I received recently was feedback, and I always say this, my greatest teachers and educators are the parents themselves, the Indigenous parents in our system, they really are. And the activity was, again, in grade 3, was having the child write a letter as a settler to a family member back in the country that they came from. Now, it's so important that we know the students in our classrooms and think about, we're thinking, you know, okay, but I'm not writing right in the Indigenous from an Indigenous perspective. What the parent said was that child felt really uncomfortable and felt that it was completely inappropriate and harmful for them to have to write from a settler's perspective being an Indigenous student. And we have to honor that and really understand how that would make a student, right, especially, and an Indigenous parent, feel it was inappropriate, right? And so how do we then respond to that is important, because here's the other thing I think it's important to mention is that we're often afraid to do the wrong thing, right? We are afraid to, but not doing anything is just as harmful, right? So we need to make sure that when we do things that we get some feedback on, that we just listen and acknowledge that learning and respond moving forward. Like we're talking about, always about, we're learners. Jody, you mentioned it right at the beginning that we're learners along students. So when we're given that feedback, that our first reaction as educators is to get defensive. But what I've learned over time is that it's more important for us at those moments to be listeners and to be reflective and to respect. As a non-Indigenous person myself, I need to respect that perspective and honor that and move forward in a good way. So again, this slide itself is just another way we often have students make connections, questions to help you when you're exploring and using Indigenous text literature in your classroom, how you can do that with students in a way that is respectful and meaningful. Again, these are those wonderful bookshelves we've developed over time and put together that are, amazing. I always say this, I think it's I could teach it grade 1, 2, and 3, maybe 3, not the entire social studies curriculum, using books as springboards and mentor texts. I really feel that there's so much rich literature now that there didn't exist even 5 years ago. I know in our school board, we did a huge clean out of our libraries where we spent a lot of time. The teacher consultant aligned to libraries took the resources that were not respectful, and we purchased a lot of many, I would say all of these that are in the bookshelves. So again, reach out to the leads in your board if you do see a title. I'm always grateful when someone brings in a new title for me to look at and to consider adding. So if there is a title here that you don't have access to, please don't hesitate to reach out and to share it with your lead in your board. So here again, these are just some examples of in the bookshelf, what you'll find is a little overview of the book itself. And then we tried to get a little video too that connects with it, or any lessons that were available that would go with it, or any additional resources. So thanks, Jody, for clicking on those.
And there's also all the 3 on the right are French books. So a lot of them are the same as the ones in English, but ones that have French versions. So this one is actually all around Truth and Reconciliation Week. So specific to residential schools. And then, so it's the same thing. You can click on any of the books and it'll give you kind of an explanation of the book, what target group, and then if there's videos that I could find of like read alouds or additional resources, I've included them. The first one is about, it's more like cultural books or just books with from Indigenous authors in general. So more of kind of that brilliance and joy piece. So just bunch of different books from different authors, same kind of idea, the explanation, the book cover, any videos that I could find, and then that last one on there on the list, if we want to go back to the slides. Yep, the last one is all linked to treaties. So actually we had seen the Alex and Dakota earlier, so those books are available in French as well. Great books. If you don't have them, I recommend getting them.
For so many years, the French immersion teachers have been just sharing how hard it is to find Indigenous resources in French. So Brittany, you've been just an amazing resource in helping to support that work for educators. And I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And, they are still not, they're not easy to find always, especially vetted resources. However, something that I like to tell people too is we need to respect the fact that there are no First Nations in Ontario that were colonized in French. And so when we're talking about, elevating Indigenous voices and local voices, we have to there is a little bit of a give and take there. And I understand that ideally we would always want things in French, but there's always ways to maybe listen to someone's perspective or their voice and then be able to continue those discussions in French afterwards. We have to have some sort of flexibility because at the end of the day, we want to put that knowledge forward. And I also tell people too, when we say, oh, we can't use that resource because it's in English, or, we want a French resource instead. What the message that we're giving is that your knowledge is less important because you can't communicate it to me in French. And when we think about loss of language, You know, how offensive is that? How awful is that to say, you know, you weren't colonized in the right language, and so, you know, there's no place for your knowledge in my classroom. So we really need to be reflective of that, and make sure that we're not giving that type of message to community and to our students.
So there's a question that's come in here, and I think it kind of might connect into this next little piece around, the question is about how to get kids that are learning their language. And the question, the example is Ojibwe, and helping them to understand why learning the language is really invaluable. And so I think it's like, the question is, again, what can teachers do to help children learn their local language, even though they might not be speaking with their family members? And again, like, I think it's, you know, looking for ways to, one of the things that I always talk about is that when you learn another language, if you can learn another language and speak another language, there's incredible neurological studies out there now that show that it actually helps your brain development. Like, you're actually a smarter person. Like, if you understand how intelligence works in the creation of neurons, it's how your neurons are being created in your brain. Language actually helps with that. So you're going to be a smarter person if you can learn another language. And if you can look for any kind of resources that, you know, have speakers talk to the beauty of, especially for Indigenous languages. One of the elders that I work with, Deahande, he's a Mohawk, and I forget the name of it in Mohawk, but when he translated it, I was complaining about the rain. I was like, oh, the rain, like, I'm so tired of the rain. It's, you know, drizzly out all the time and it makes me feel bad. And he's like, you know, in our language, it means visibly precious. And so, so can you imagine then me complaining? But if I only knew the word for rain as visibly precious, how might I be thinking differently about that? If I'm hardwired to see it as visibly precious, and, you know, probably a little less cranky. And so, you know, if we can try and also convey and understand that worldview and this beautiful way of understanding and our relationship with everything is all rooted in the language, which is why I think, you know, I'm a huge advocate for wherever you are locally, that should be the language that you're learning. So this little resource is actually in development right now. We were hoping it was going to be done, but, you know, things take longer. So I'm just going to play the trailer for it because it will have, as you can see here, very specific connections. And the whole idea about it is that, again, building on kind of the videos that we had started with, Isaac and Shannon, and Nana Bojo and Nokomis, and that they are traveling and they're getting to meet people from other parts of the world to talk about those key pieces in the curriculum.
Oh my goodness, hello kids, how are you? Let me grab Shannon.
Wow! Hi, everybody!
Hey!
Okay, so a little snippet as to what's to come. So you can see, like, there'll be meeting with all these different people and talking about the different cultures that they come from and how traditions are passed down with their people and all of that good stuff. Now, this these are guidelines. And again, we're just gonna, because we're past time, but since we're recording it anyway, we'll go a little bit over. This comes from these guidelines. There's a 2-page nice checklist at the end of this resource that was recently developed. This, if you click on it, it comes from the Catholic Virtual Learning site. But it's a big resource. Dr. Negon Sinclair wrote the foreword for it, and it has a lot of the things that we've been talking about along the way, as well as this checklist. And so it's designed so that it's just an easy, like if you're thinking about an activity and you're not really sure and you just want to kind of check in, that's what it's designed to do. Just to help make sure you're on the right path. And I'm just kind of thinking, just some big pieces kind of, things like citizenship, like that's a big one. So, that making sure we're not imposing citizenship on people. So for example, Indigenous Canadians. So to be Canadian should always be a choice. And this is one of these bigger understandings when you kind of understand the implications of the Indian Act and the goals of colonialism was either eradication or assimilation. Everyone becomes a Canadian. And so this is the big effort, is to understand that not everybody here is Canadian, and that is okay. So like using the Anishinaabeg as an example, like if you're Anishinaabeg, you're Anishinaabeg. You shouldn't have to be forced into being Canadian. Maybe, you could have dual citizenship if you wanted to have, but this is like the big piece all along, is that Canada has been imposing itself onto the people. And this is what we're trying to understand and educate on. And when I talked about the maps, right? So right now, all we see is the map of Canada. We color in the provinces and things like that. Well, that's going to change because we now have things like Treaty Recognition Week. Well, if we're talking about treaties, that's nation to nation. That means there's other nations here, and we can't just keep erasing them off the maps anymore. So, maps are going to change. I'm kind of excited about it. I'm looking forward to, this new wave of education to really radically change our relationship here. The other thing too, there's all kinds of things. We've talked about this, about story. We've talked about, not taking on the role and voice of other people. And then the big one here is, focus, making sure we're not just having a trauma narrative, especially in primary, especially in elementary. Again, that the main pieces here are beauty, joy, brilliance, diversity, sophistication of nations and civilizations, that people have always existed. And we're not just talking about people in the past, that there's, representation of the diversity and identities, so all kinds of things there. And again, a checklist to just kind of go through about thinking about those kinds of activities. We've talked a lot about these as well. Plan as though you have Indigenous students in your class. For those, I know some of you here work directly in First Nation schools, but for those who are in the public schools, assume you have kids because you probably do. Whether they've self-identified or not is a whole other, we don't really have time to get into, but make the assumption you do. But if you do know that you do have kids, be very conscious not to single them out. It happens more often. Unfortunately, just be very conscious that you're not, saying, hey, what do you think? Or, hey, what do you think this word means? Or, because this happens a lot. And we hear from Indigenous students and families that, again, it's not that teachers are trying to create these uncomfortable experiences, but, that's what's happening in these situations. So we just want to be really, really mindful about that. I'm trying to get to this next button. We're almost there. Oh, so just again, so as we're just to kind of wrap up, so these are these big ideas that we want you to get across. Don't be afraid. Fight the fear. Don't be afraid. It's important because when you say to students in your classroom, I don't really know a lot about this, but I think, it's really important that we learn about this together. there is nothing more powerful and more affirming, because kids don't care if you know everything or not. All they care about is that they see you say that this is important, which means they're important. So, be brave. We've given you so many things here to take away, to use. All of the resources that we've shared are they're designed for that, to take you along that learning journey with them. We have all of these links here that you can click on, and these are more resources. These are for you as adults to develop further your learning. So definitely not for primary, maybe for secondary. So again, we invite you to, explore those for your own learning. And lastly, this one here, because we're coming into June. So in here, this thing that's loading, this has all kinds of contributions that you can, again, they're like pop-out slide decks, and Brittany, who's amazing, has done so much in translating into French as well. So for example, you can pop it out by clicking on the links, but basically you can start here, you can roll the thing, or you could just, oh, I'm not sure what happened there, but you can click on a date, or a number. It's getting late. And then, it takes you to an answer. So we'll just, another one, for example, is, oh, I'm just losing my mind here. Okay, so you can click on any one of these, and then it'll take you to the answer. If you don't, does anybody here know who this is? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you didn't know, you could learn. And there's little videos that you can share to further your learning together. And again, there's French versions. This one's for junior grades, and French version again, 7 to 12. There's stuff in here. It's taking a while to load, but we'll scroll through that because we're doing primary here. And in here, there's like inventions and innovations, change makers, music makers, also en français, scientists and researchers, authors. It just goes on and on and on. Journalists. Like, do you see what I mean? There's something for everyone here. There's no reason to not just get going on this, even if it's just contributions. Like if we could just flood our schools with contributions, like think of the change that would make in society and how people think about Indigenous people when all you can see is just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds examples of amazingness. So that is there for you as well. And I know that we're way over time here. So you can, again, oh, there's a Jeopardy game too, if you want to play, like lots of games in here. So that all of that is there for you. And I'm just going back to see if there's any questions. Oh, somebody had posted in here, Sol Mamakwa will be speaking in the Ontario Legislature tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. Stay tuned, because it's the first time there was a bill finally passed that Indigenous politicians can speak in their own language. So that is happening tomorrow. Our language teacher has actually got personally invited, so he's going to be there tomorrow. We're really excited about that. So big moments. Also goes back to that, maybe showcase that to kids to see, in terms of the pride.
Jody,
So
there was a question too, Jody, about someone's asking if there's going to be a webinar in grades 4 to 8.
I think we did one when there's probably one on our site when we did it when that curriculum came out. I'm sure we did one.
Maybe the link can be shared as a follow-up.
Yeah. Do you want to just, Brittany, do you want to pop in for those who may have come after the fact one last time? I'll follow up with the link to the recording as well to all the registrants, and with the link again to the slide deck that we shared. So all of there you go. It's in the chat. So there's there's the link. So you have our slide deck and you have access in that deck. You have all the links that we've shared. So you can go back through that and play around with those resources. Again, connect with for those in the provincial system, connect with your Indigenous lead, you know, look for those local connections. And yeah, and reach out if you have questions in the future. You can reach out to past chair at fnmieao.com. I'm happy to help redirect or try and answer your questions if you have any. And if there's any last minute questions now, we're happy to stay on for a few more minutes.
Just thank you. These are amazing resources, and I was thrilled to see that books I've been buying for our library were some of the ones you were showing. So
awesome.
Fantastic. David A. Robertson is such a resource, my goodness. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming tonight. And, you know, like we said, this is how we change society. So keep doing all the really great work that you're doing, and, you know, keep highlighting and celebrating the amazing contributions of Indigenous peoples. So have a great night.
Thank you.